My own grandson saved my life with a note discreetly slipped to me during dinner. Pretend to be sick and leave immediately, the crumpled paper read. Confused, I followed his instructions. 5 minutes later, I watched in horror as my husband of 30 years served poisoned champagne only into my glass, all while smiling lovingly at me. That night, I discovered that the man I had shared my life with had hatched a plan with my daughter-in-law to inherit my fortune after my accidental death. But before I continue my story, make sure you're already subscribed to the channel and write in the comments, what part of the United States are you watching this video from? We love to know how far our stories are reaching. I never thought a family dinner could become the scene of an attempted murder, especially not when the killer was the man I had shared a bed with for 3 decades. The day began like any other. I was in the kitchen, preparing a chocolate layer cake for my grandson Caleb's 15th birthday. Richard, my husband, had left early for a business meeting with our daughter-in-law, Chloe. I didn't think much of it at the time. Richard and Chloe often discussed the family's investments. "Grandma, that's going to be delicious," Caleb said, watching as I covered the cake with chocolate frosting. His eyes, so much like my late son's, sparkled with anticipation. "I hope so," I replied, smiling. "Your grandfather bought special champagne to celebrate tonight." Caleb hesitated, as if he wanted to say something, but Chloe called him from the other room. He ran out of the kitchen, casting a strange glance over his shoulder. Dinner was scheduled for 7 o'clock. Richard had insisted it be a sophisticated event, despite it being just the 4 of us. I thought he was just trying to make up for our son's absence. "Eleanor, wear that necklace I gave you for our anniversary," Richard suggested as I was getting ready. "The diamond one. Don't you think that's a bit much for a dinner at home, Richard?" I asked. "It's a special occasion," he insisted, his eyes fixed on me with an intensity I found strange. Dinner began promptly at 7 o'clock. The table was elegantly set with our best china and crystal glasses. Richard seemed nervous, constantly checking his watch. Chloe was stunning in a black dress, which looked far too new for a simple family celebration. "A toast to Caleb," Richard announced, standing up to open the champagne bottle. 15 years old, almost a man. It was then that I noticed Caleb watching me with a worried expression. As Richard poured the champagne, Caleb deliberately knocked over his water glass. "I'm so sorry," he exclaimed, creating a commotion. In the midst of the confusion, he brushed past me, slipping a piece of paper into my hand. "I'll go get more napkins," Chloe said, quickly leaving the dining room. I discreetly opened the note under the table. "Pretend to be sick and leave immediately." My heart hammered. Why would Caleb send me a message like that? I looked at him, and he nodded slightly, his eyes begging me to trust him. "Richard," I said, touching my forehead. "I'm not feeling well. I think I need to lie down." "But, darling, we've only just started," he protested, with a strange note of urgency in his voice. "At least have a sip of champagne first, to celebrate." "Maybe Grandma needs an aspirin," Caleb suggested, standing up. "I'll walk her to her room." "No," Richard almost shouted, startling us all. He quickly composed himself. Chloe can do it. "I want to talk to you about your gift, Caleb." Chloe returned at that moment. "What's going on?" "Eleanor isn't feeling well," Richard said, pushing my glass toward me. "Just one sip before you go, honey, for the celebration." I noticed something in his eyes. Anxiety? Impatience? I looked at the glass and realized that only mine had a strange residue at the bottom. "Actually, I think I'd better go lie down," I replied, pushing my chair back. "Caleb, will you help me? I'm a little dizzy." Richard stood up abruptly. "I'll take my wife," he insisted, grabbing my arm with enough force to leave a mark. I had never seen him like this. "Dad," Chloe intervened. "Let Caleb go. You and I need to discuss that matter." A meaningful look passed between them, and Richard reluctantly let go of my arm. Caleb quickly moved to my side, and we left the dining room. As soon as we were out of earshot, Caleb whispered urgently, "Grandma, we can't stay. We have to leave now." "Caleb, what is going on?" I demanded, my heart pounding. "I heard Mom and Grandpa talking last night," he said, his voice trembling. "They put something in your drink. Something too." He couldn't finish. My world tilted. "My husband," The man I had built a life with was trying to poison me? It was absurd, impossible. But then I remembered Richard's insistence that I wear expensive jewelry, his nervousness, the way he practically tried to force me to drink the champagne. "Are you sure?" I asked, desperately wanting it to be a misunderstanding. "Yes," Caleb replied, tears in his eyes. "They don't know I heard them. They talked about your insurance policy, about how the money would solve their financial problems." Financial problems? Richard had never mentioned financial problems. We had always lived comfortably on the inheritance I received from my parents. "Grandma, they said it would look like a heart attack. No one would suspect." I felt my legs weaken. My own family had conspired to kill me. For money. "We have to call the police," I said, trying to stay calm. "We can't use the house phones," Caleb warned. "Grandpa might find out. We have to get out of here first." He was right. My 15-year-old grandson was thinking more clearly than I was. I nodded, trying to control the tremor in my hands. "There's a back exit, through the laundry room," I suggested. "They'll notice we're taking too long," Caleb said. "We have to be fast." We walked silently to my room, where I grabbed my purse and a coat. We carefully avoided the creaking floorboards, moving like ghosts in our own home in Hinsdale. As we went down the back staircase, I heard Richard's voice calling my name. There was a note of impatience, maybe even anger, in his voice. That confirmed my suspicions in a way words couldn't. We escaped through the laundry room door into the cold night, not knowing where to go or what would happen next. We just knew we couldn't stay. That night, as we hurried down the street, one thing became clear. My life, as I knew it, was over. My husband hadn't just betrayed my trust, he had tried to take my life. And if it hadn't been for the courage and love of my grandson, he would have succeeded. We walked for nearly an hour before finding a small roadside motel where we could spend the night. I used cash instead of a credit card, an instinct that I later discovered was crucial. I didn't want to leave any trail that Richard could follow. "Grandma, what are we going to do now?" Caleb asked, sitting on the edge of the motel bed, looking much younger than his 15 years. "First, we need to understand exactly what's happening," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Tell me everything you heard." Caleb took a deep breath. "I came downstairs for a glass of water last night. They were in the study, Grandpa and my mom. The door was cracked open, and I heard Grandpa say that everything was ready for today, that the poison was undetectable and would look natural." My stomach churned. Hearing the words spoken aloud made it all so real, so brutal. "My mom asked about the will, if everything was in order," Caleb continued, his voice shaking. "Grandpa said yes, that you had signed those papers a few weeks ago without reading them properly." "Papers?" I strained to remember. Richard had asked me to sign some documents related to investments. He said it was urgent, and there was no time for me to review them completely. I trusted him, as I always had. "And then," Caleb went on, "Grandpa said that with the life insurance and the inheritance, they would be debt-free and no one would suspect." "What debts?" I asked, more to myself than to Caleb. "I don't know the details, but it sounded serious." My mom was really nervous, talking about creditors and deadlines. I tried to process it all. Richard and Chloe were in financial trouble? Why had Richard never told me? We had been partners for 30 years. I thought we shared everything. "There's more," Caleb said, hesitating. They talked about having tried before." I froze. "What do you mean, tried before?" "Grandpa said that the last time. You didn't eat enough of the cake for it to work. That they needed something stronger this time." The cake. 3 months ago, I had become violently ill after a family dinner. The doctors diagnosed it as food poisoning. Richard had been so attentive, staying by my side in the hospital, holding my hand. A wave of nausea hit me. It hadn't been food poisoning. It had been my husband, trying to kill me. "Caleb," I said, grabbing his hands, "you're in danger for helping me. They'll realize you knew." Fear crossed his eyes. He hadn't thought of that. "We have to call the police," I decided, reaching for the motel phone. "Wait," Caleb stopped me. "What if they don't believe us? We don't have any proof. It'll be our word against theirs." He was right. What would we say? That my respectable husband, a pillar of the community, was trying to poison me? Without evidence, we would sound crazy. Maybe we should get proof first, Caleb suggested. Something concrete we can show the police. Like what? I don't know. Maybe documents? About the debts? Or the insurance? I thought for a moment. Richard's study. He keeps all the important documents there. If we could get back in when they aren't home. But they'll be looking for us, Caleb argued. Yes, but they don't know we're suspicious of them. They might just think I left because I felt sick. I decided to call home, to establish our alibi. I took a deep breath and dialed the number. Richard answered on the first ring. Eleanor? Where are you? I forced my voice to sound weak and sick. Richard, I'm so sorry I left like that. I felt so awful. I asked Caleb to take me to the hospital. The hospital? He sounded genuinely surprised. Why didn't you call me? I would have taken you. The ease with which he feigned concern turned my stomach. It was just so sudden. I'm better now, but the doctors want to keep me for observation overnight. Caleb is with me. Which hospital? I'm coming over right now. No need, I said quickly. It's late, and they aren't allowing any more visitors. We'll be back tomorrow morning. There was a pause. Was he suspicious? Well, if you're sure, he finally replied. Rest well. I love you. The words that once warmed me now sounded like a death sentence. I love you too, I replied mechanically, hanging up. Caleb looked at me with admiration. That was amazing, Grandma. He totally believed you. I felt no pride in being a good liar to my husband, only a profound sorrow for having been so blind for so long. Let's get some rest, I suggested. Tomorrow we have to plan our next move. But as Caleb drifted off to sleep, I lay awake, replaying the last few months in my mind. How many signs did I miss? How many food poisonings were actually attempts on my life? And, most painfully, when exactly did the man I loved decide I was worth more dead than alive? The sadness slowly gave way to anger not just for me, but for Caleb. He lost his father, my dear son, just 3 years ago, and now he discovered his grandfather and his mother are potential murderers. I swore to myself that I would not let them get away with it, not just for what they tried to do to me, but for what they did to Caleb. They stole his innocence, his trust in the world, and they would pay for it. I was awakened by the sound of my cell phone. It was Chloe. Eleanor? Richard said you're in the hospital. Why didn't you let me know? Her voice overflowed with concern, but now I could hear the falseness behind it. It was all very sudden, I replied, keeping my voice weak. I didn't want to bother anyone. Which hospital? I'll come pick you up now. An alarm bell went off in my mind. They were trying to locate us. No need, I replied. We're leaving now, actually. The doctors just discharged me. We're going to grab some breakfast and then head home. Oh. She sounded disappointed. Well, if you're sure. Absolutely. See you at the house in a couple of hours. I hung up and turned to Caleb, who had woken up during the call. They're getting nervous, I observed. We need to act fast. After a quick breakfast at the small diner attached to the motel, we planned our strategy. We would return home as if nothing had happened. I would pretend to be recovering from a passing illness while Caleb would find a way to check Richard's study. It's going to be dangerous, I warned. We have to take the risk, Grandma, Caleb replied, with a determination that made me proud and worried at the same time. We can't just run forever. He was right. We needed concrete proof before we went to the police. We arrived home around 10 o'clock in the morning, back to our neighborhood in Hinsdale. Richard was in the living room, pretending to read the newspaper, but the tension in his shoulders gave him away. Eleanor! He stood up, coming toward me with open arms. I was so worried. I forced myself to accept his embrace, fighting the urge to pull away. His touch, once comforting, now felt repulsive. I'm fine, I replied, just exhausted. I think I'll go rest for a bit. Of course, he agreed quickly. Do you want me to bring you anything? Tea? Some broth? No, thank you, I replied, trying not to think about what he might put in the food. I just need to sleep. Chloe appeared in the doorway, her face a perfect mask of concern. Eleanor, you gave us such a scare. What did the doctors say? Just stress and dehydration, I lied. Nothing serious. Thank goodness, she sighed, theatrically placing a hand on her heart. Caleb, come help me in the kitchen. Your grandmother needs to rest. Caleb shot me a worried glance before reluctantly following his mother. In my room, I locked the door, something I had never done, and sat on the edge of the bed, shaking. How could I sleep knowing there were people under the same roof who wanted me dead? After about an hour, I heard a soft knock on the door. Grandma? Caleb's voice was just a whisper. Can I come in? I quickly unlocked the door, letting him in before locking it again. They left, he reported. Grandpa said he had an urgent meeting, and my mom went with him. They said they'll be back in a couple of hours. This was our chance. Let's go to the study, I decided. Richard's study had always been his sanctuary. In the 30 years of our marriage, I rarely entered it without being invited. Now, I was violating that space not as a wife, but as a detective investigating my own near death. The door was locked, as expected. Now what? Caleb asked. I remembered something. Richard always keeps a spare key. I felt above the doorframe, and sure enough, there it was, a small key. The study was impeccably organized, as always. Shelves lined with books, the antique mahogany desk that belonged to his father, the brand new laptop I bought him for his birthday last year. Where do we start? Caleb asked. Financial documents, I replied, heading to the filing cabinet next to the desk. Look for anything related to life insurance, wills, or debts. While Caleb checked the desk drawers, I began sifting through the folders in the filing cabinet. Most contained mundane documents, paid bills, household service contracts, appliance warranties. Then, I found a folder labeled with my name. Inside, there was a life insurance policy in my name, with Richard as the sole beneficiary. The sum shocked me. $5 million. I had no idea I was insured for that much. Caleb, look at this, I called, showing him the document. He examined the papers. The date. This was taken out just 3 months ago, right when I started having those food poisoning episodes. Continuing the search, I found another folder, this one unlabeled. Inside were bank statements showing an account I knew nothing about, with large sums being withdrawn regularly. The statements showed payments to something called Peak Investments. What is this? I murmured. Grandma, look. Caleb called from the desk. He had turned on Richard's laptop and was going through his emails. He has hundreds of emails from this Peak Investments. It looks like some kind of fraudulent investment scheme. I looked over his shoulder. The emails revealed an alarming story. Richard had invested heavily in a high-risk scheme that promised astronomical returns. But the investments failed, and he lost everything, including money borrowed from loan sharks. He's ruined, I realized, feeling a mix of shock and betrayal. And he never told me a thing. There's more, Caleb said, clicking on another email folder. Emails between Grandpa and my mom. The emails were explicit. Richard and Chloe had been planning my death for months. They discussed methods, timing, how to make it look natural. And most disturbingly, they mentioned previous attempts that had failed. 3 times, I whispered, feeling sick. They tried to kill me 3 times before last night. Caleb was pale. Grandma, my mom wrote that she was researching undetectable poisons. The pain of seeing those words, of knowing my own daughter-in-law was researching ways to kill me, was almost physical. But there was no time to fully absorb the blow. We needed proof we could show the police. Print those emails, I told him, and take pictures of the documents from the filing cabinet. While Caleb printed the evidence, I found something even more disturbing. A new will, supposedly signed by me a few weeks ago, leaving everything to Richard. The signature looked very much like mine, but I knew I had never signed such a document. They forged my signature, I realized, feeling a new wave of betrayal. My God, how long have they been planning this? We heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. They're back? Caleb exclaimed, panic in his voice. We quickly gathered all the evidence we had collected, shut down the laptop, and put everything back in its place. We left the study, locked the door, and returned the key to its hiding spot. We barely had time to get to my room before we heard the front door open. Eleanor? Richard called out. Are you awake? I exchanged a look with Caleb. We were sitting on a ticking time bomb, and time was running out. "Stay here," I whispered to Caleb. "I'll go down and act normal." I tucked the evidence we had gathered inside a book on my bookshelf, a place Richard would never look, and went downstairs, forcing a smile. "I feel much better after resting," I announced. Richard and Chloe were in the living room, talking in low voices. When they saw me, they both smiled. Smiles that I now realized were as fake as their concern. "That's wonderful, dear," Richard said, coming toward me. "I was just thinking, maybe we should reschedule our celebration for tonight?" Since it was interrupted yesterday, my blood ran cold. He wanted to try again. So soon. "Maybe it's better to wait a few days," I suggested casually. "I'm still a little weak." "Nonsense," Richard insisted, putting his arm around my shoulders. His touch, once comforting, now felt like a snake's embrace. "A good dinner and some champagne will perk you right up." Chloe nodded vigorously. "I agree with Richard. Besides, Caleb was so disappointed yesterday. They were using my love for my grandson against me. The cruelty of it hit me like a slap." "Speaking of Caleb," Richard continued, "where is the boy?" "Resting," I replied quickly. "He stayed up all night with me at the hospital." "I'll go check on him," Chloe offered, getting up. "No," I exclaimed, perhaps too forcefully. They both looked at me, surprised. "I mean, let him sleep. He's exhausted." Chloe and Richard exchanged a look I couldn't decipher. "In fact," I continued, trying to sound casual, "I was thinking of going to the pharmacy for some vitamins. The doctor recommended them." "I can go for you," Richard offered immediately. No, I need to get some air. A little walk will do me good." "Then I'll go with you," he insisted. It was becoming difficult to find excuses. "Richard, I'd really prefer to go alone. I need to clear my head." "But dear, you just got out of the hospital. You shouldn't be walking around by yourself." The concern in his voice would sound genuine to anyone who didn't know the truth. To me, it sounded like the desperation of a man trying to keep his prey under control. "I'll be fine," I insisted, standing up. "I won't be long." Before he could protest further, I went upstairs to grab my purse. Caleb was waiting anxiously in the hallway. "What's happening?" he whispered. "They want to try again tonight," I explained quickly. "I'm going to the police station right now with our proof. Stay here and act normal. I'll be back with the police." Fear crossed his eyes. "It's dangerous to leave you alone with them. You'll be safer if you seem like you don't know anything," I argued. "Just avoid eating or drinking anything they offer you." I grabbed the evidence hidden in the book and put it in my purse. When I came back down, Richard was waiting for me at the door. "Are you sure you don't want company?" he asked, subtly blocking the exit. "Absolutely," I replied, keeping my voice firm. "I'll be back in an hour, tops." He reluctantly stepped aside, and I finally got out onto the street, feeling his gaze on my back as I walked away. Instead of going to the pharmacy, I walked quickly toward the nearest police station, about 20 minutes from our house. My mind was racing, trying to organize how I would explain everything. Who would believe that my devoted husband of 30 years was trying to kill me? That my daughter-in-law was helping? It sounded like the plot of a cheap thriller. I was so absorbed in these thoughts that I didn't notice the car slowing down behind me until it pulled up alongside me. The window rolled down, revealing Chloe's face. "Eleanor, what a coincidence," she exclaimed, her smile not reaching her eyes. "I was just heading to the grocery store. Need a lift?" My heart leaped. "Were you following me?" "No, thank you," I replied, continuing to walk. "Like I said, I need the exercise." "I insist," she said, her tone hardening slightly. "In fact, Richard asked me to make sure you got to the pharmacy okay. He's worried." Of course he was. Worried I might be going to the police instead of the pharmacy. "Chloe, I'd really prefer to walk." She parked the car and got out, walking toward me. "What are you hiding, Eleanor?" The pretense was gone. Her eyes were cold, calculating. I remembered the emails, how she had meticulously researched poisons to kill me. "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied, taking a step back. "I think you do." She stepped forward. "Caleb told you something, didn't he?" Fear tightened my throat. "Caleb? Tell me what?" "Don't play dumb," she hissed. You've never gone for a walk by yourself in your entire life. Richard always goes with you everywhere. So why now? Why today? We were in the middle of the street. People were walking by, but no one noticed the tension between us. Chloe, you're imagining things, I said, trying to stay calm. I just want some vitamins. Let me see your purse, she demanded, holding out her hand. What? No. She grabbed my arm with surprising strength. What do you have in there? What do you know? I yanked my arm, freeing myself from her grip. Don't touch me. Are you crazy? You were in Richard's study, she accused me. We saw the recent print jobs on the printer. My heart hammered. They knew. They knew we had discovered their plan. I'm going home now, I declared, trying to keep my voice steady. No, you're not. Chloe blocked my path. You're going to get in the car, and we're going to talk about this. Panic rose in my throat. Getting in that car would be like signing my own death warrant. Chloe, I said slowly, there are people around. Do you really want to make a scene here? She looked around, noticing the passers-by who were beginning to watch us with curiosity. We're going to sort this out as a family, she said, forcing a smile at the onlookers, like civilized adults. I agree, I replied, seizing the opportunity. I'll go back to the house now, and we'll all talk together. I started walking back, praying she wouldn't stop me again. My mind was racing. I couldn't go to the station now. Chloe would follow me. I needed a new plan. I'm coming with you, she announced, walking beside me, her arm linked firmly with mine, as if we were best friends. The entire walk back, Chloe maintained a casual conversation, as if nothing had happened. It was surreal. Moments before she was practically threatening me, and now she was talking about the weather and cake recipes. When we reached the house, Richard was waiting anxiously at the door. I found Eleanor on the way, Chloe explained meaningfully. We decided it was better for her to rest a bit more before going out. The look Richard gave me was icy, despite his warm smile. Of course, dear. You have to take care of your health. I entered the house feeling like a prisoner. Where was Caleb? I looked for him and found him in the living room, flipping through a magazine with feigned casualness. Our eyes met briefly, and I tried to silently communicate that something had gone wrong. Caleb, Chloe called, her voice saccharine sweet. Can you help your grandmother upstairs? She's not feeling well again. It was a trap to separate us, I knew, but it was also our only chance to communicate. Caleb came over to me, offering his arm. As we climbed the stairs, I whispered quickly, They know. We have to get out of here as fast as possible. His eyes widened in fear, but he kept his composure. How? I couldn't get to the station. Chloe followed me. We reached my room, and Caleb closed the door behind us. They're going to do something tonight, I continued whispering. At dinner, we need a plan. We could try to climb out the window, Caleb suggested, looking at the large bedroom window that overlooked the backyard. It's too high, I replied, gauging the distance to the ground. And they're probably watching the house. We sat in silence for a few moments, the gravity of the situation weighing on us. We were trapped in our own home with people who wanted us dead. What if we pretend to go along with the dinner? Caleb proposed. But we record everything? If we can get them to admit to the plan, we'd have proof. It was risky, but it might work. How would we do that? I have a voice recorder on my phone. I could hide it in the dining room. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was the best we had at the moment. Okay, I agreed. But we have to be extremely careful. No eating or drinking anything they offer us. There was a knock on the door, making us jump. Eleanor? It was Richard's voice. Can I come in? Caleb and I exchanged alarmed glances before I answered. Of course, honey. Richard entered, his face a mask of concern. How are you feeling? A little better, I replied, but still tired. Chloe and I were talking, he said, sitting on the edge of the bed. We think maybe you should see a specialist. These sudden dizzy spells could be a sign of something more serious. They were building a narrative, setting the stage for when I died of natural causes. Maybe you're right, I agreed, playing along. I'll schedule an appointment next week. Why not today? He insisted. I can call Dr. Torres right now. Dr. Torres. The doctor who misdiagnosed my previous food poisonings. Was he in on it too? Not today, I replied. I'm exhausted. I just want to rest. Well, at least have dinner with us tonight, Richard said, his voice soft but insistent. Chloe is making something special to make up for yesterday's interruption. I swallowed hard. Of course. I can't wait. When Richard left, Caleb and I exchanged looks. The plan was in motion. Would we survive this night, or would it be our end? The next few hours were an exercise in nerve-wracking tension. I stayed in my room, pretending to rest, while actually packing a small overnight bag with essentials, documents, cash, some clothes. If we got the proof tonight, we would flee immediately. Around 7 o'clock, Chloe called us to dinner. The table was impeccably set, almost identical to the night before. The same fine china, the same crystal glasses, the same bottle of expensive champagne. Caleb had managed to hide his phone under the sideboard, near the table, positioned to capture all the conversations. Our plan was simple. Get them to talk about the poison, record the confession, and then create a distraction that would allow us to escape and go straight to the police. So good to see you feeling better, Eleanor, Chloe commented, serving the soup. I noticed she served my plate directly from the tureen, while the others served themselves. Thank you, I replied, eyeing the plate suspiciously. I wouldn't touch that food if my life depended on it. Ironically, that was exactly the case. A toast, Richard announced, standing up to pour the champagne. To the family's health. Again, I watched as he filled my glass from a specific bottle, different from the one he served himself and the others. To health, I agreed, raising the glass but only pretending to drink. The dinner proceeded in a tense, surreal atmosphere. Superficial conversations about the weather, about the news, as if we weren't all engaged in a deadly game. I noticed Caleb wasn't eating either, just pushing the food around his plate. Chloe noticed. Caleb, aren't you hungry? She asked, her voice falsely sweet. Just a little under the weather, he replied. Like your grandmother, Richard observed, shooting me a significant look. Maybe it's something genetic. The insinuation sent a chill down my spine. They were building a story of hereditary health problems. In fact, I said, deciding to take a gamble, I was thinking about my will recently. Richard nearly choked on his wine. Your will? Why? Well, with these sudden health scares, I thought it was prudent to get my affairs in order. Chloe and Richard exchanged a quick glance. Don't be morbid, dear, Richard said, forcing a laugh. You'll live for many more years. Who knows? I retorted. Life is unpredictable. Healthy people drop dead every day. What are you implying, Eleanor? Chloe asked, her voice sharp. It was time to provoke them, to make them reveal their intentions. Just that we should be prepared for any eventuality, I replied casually. For example, if something were to happen to me, say, tonight, who would inherit my assets? The silence that followed was deafening. Why would you ask something like that? Richard finally broke the silence, his voice strained. Just curious, I replied, keeping my tone light while my heart hammered frantically. After all, there's a lot at stake, isn't there? My inheritance, the life insurance. Chloe dropped her fork, the metal clattering loudly against the china. Life insurance? Richard repeated, his eyes narrowing. What exactly are you talking about, Eleanor? Oh, you know, I continued, playing with fire. The $5 million policy you took out in my name 3 months ago. The one I'm not supposed to know about. Richard's face visibly paled. Chloe grabbed her wine glass, taking a long drink. How? Richard began, then stopped, composing himself. Dear, I think you're confused. It must be the medication from the hospital. I'm not confused, Richard, I replied, my voice steady. Just as I'm not confused about peak investments, or the debts you hid from me, or the 3 previous times you tried to poison me. Caleb watched the scene with wide eyes, clearly nervous about my direct approach. But I needed them to confess. I needed concrete proof on tape. Richard stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. That's enough. You're clearly not well. We're taking you back to the hospital. What for? To give me more medicine that's actually poison? Chloe stood up too. Eleanor, you're being ridiculous. Richard has been your husband for 30 years. Why would he try to harm you? For money, Chloe, I replied simply. The same reason you agreed to help him. 5 million from the insurance, plus my inheritance. Enough to cover his debts with plenty left over. This is absurd, Richard exploded, but his eyes betrayed his panic. You have no proof of any of this. Actually, I said, leaning forward, I do. Emails, documents, the forged will, everything. Richard's face twisted into a mask of fury. You were in my study? It wasn't a question. And you put poison in my food, I countered. I think we're even. Chloe took a step toward me, her demeanor completely transformed. There was no more pretense of concern, just raw anger. You don't get it, do you? She hissed. He lost everything. Everything! The investments. Your son's money, yes, the money that was supposed to go to Caleb. Richard gambled it all away and lost. And now the loan sharks are after him, after us. Chloe. Richard tried to silence her, but it was too late. No, Richard, she continued hysterically. She needs to know. She needs to understand why we did it. They threatened Caleb, Eleanor. They said they would hurt him if we didn't pay. What were we supposed to do? Anything except try to kill me, I shouted, standing up as well. I would have helped you if you had just asked. You would never understand, Richard replied bitterly. You and your money, your inheritance. Always feeling superior because you came from a wealthy family while I had to work for every penny. The revelation stunned me. Is that what he thought of me all these years? That I thought I was superior? I loved you, I said, my voice trembling. I trusted you with everything I had. And now you're going to report us? Chloe asked, taking another step toward me. You're going to send your grandson's grandfather to prison? Send me to prison, leaving Caleb all alone in the world? She was trying to manipulate me, using my love for Caleb as a weapon. I looked at my grandson, seeing the anguish in his eyes as he watched his mother admit to conspiring to murder his grandmother. You didn't think about Caleb when you planned to kill me, I replied coldly. Don't use him as a shield now. Richard suddenly seemed calm, dangerously calm. You have nowhere to go, Eleanor, he said, his voice almost gentle. Think about it. If you report this, the scandal will destroy our family. The press will feast on the story. Caleb will suffer. And what's the alternative? I asked. I drink the poison willingly? I die to save appearances? It doesn't have to be that way, Richard replied, his eyes calculating. We could come to an arrangement. What kind of arrangement? You sign everything over to us, legally. The house, the accounts, everything. You change your will. You give us power of attorney. In exchange, we let you go. I almost laughed at the absurdity of the proposal. And I'm supposed to trust you, after all this? It's your best option, Chloe insisted. The only one that keeps this family intact. Caleb finally spoke, his voice shaking. This isn't a family, it's a nightmare. Chloe turned to him, startled, as if she had forgotten he was there. Caleb, honey, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, he interrupted, standing up. You and Grandpa tried to kill Grandma. For money. And now, you're trying to manipulate her into giving you everything. This isn't a family, it's a criminal conspiracy. The pride I felt for him in that moment was immense. Despite everything, he could see the situation with the moral clarity his own mother lacked. Let's go, Grandma, Caleb said, coming to my side. You're not going anywhere, Richard declared, blocking our path to the door. Not until we resolve this. It is resolved, I replied firmly. It's over, Richard. You betrayed my trust in the worst way possible. There's no deal, no negotiation. The look he gave me was chilling. Then you leave me no choice. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small vial. Do you know what this is? It's enough to kill you both. Instantly. No suffering, quick and painless. My blood ran cold. You wouldn't I? His smile was terrible to see. What do I have to lose now? You've already figured everything out. If I can't have the money, I can at least avoid prison. Chloe looked alarmed. Richard, this wasn't part of the plan. The plan changed, he replied, never taking his eyes off me. If I can't have the money, no one will. It all happened very fast after that. Richard lunged toward us, vial in hand. Caleb stepped between us. trying to protect me. Chloe screamed something unintelligible. And then, the dining room door burst open. Police! Freeze! 3 uniformed officers entered the room, their weapons raised. Richard froze, the vial still in his hand. Drop it, now, one of the officers ordered. Richard slowly lowered the vial, his face a mask of defeat and fury. On the ground, both of you, another officer commanded, gesturing to Richard and Chloe. As they were being handcuffed, a third officer approached us. Ma'am? Eleanor? I'm Sergeant Lopez. We received your emergency call. I looked at Caleb, confused. He smiled nervously. I called the police when you were in the bedroom, he explained. Using the house landline. I said it was an emergency, that my grandfather was threatening to kill my grandmother. The wave of relief that washed over me was overwhelming. While I was preparing our escape, Caleb had taken the initiative to call for help. We have recordings, I added quickly, pointing to where Caleb's phone was hidden, of the entire confession. The sergeant nodded. That will be very helpful. We'll need you both to come to the station to give a full statement. As Richard and Chloe were being let out, Richard turned to me one last time. This isn't over, Eleanor, he threatened. One way or another. I'll make you pay. The sergeant pushed him forward. Save your threats for the judge, sir. I watched my husband, the man who swore to love and protect me, being led away in custody for trying to murder me. The feeling was surreal, as if it were happening to someone else. Caleb took my hand, squeezing it in solidarity. It's over, Grandma, he said softly. We're safe now. But as we walked out of the house I had called home for so long, I couldn't help but wonder, would I ever feel safe again? The following days passed in a blur of police statements, preliminary hearings, and endless meetings with lawyers. The story leaked to the press, just as Richard had predicted. Prominent businessman attempts to poison wealthy wife in Chicago suburb ran the local headlines. Caleb and I stayed in a hotel downtown, unable to return to the house that was now contaminated with memories of betrayal. The police found enough evidence to hold Richard and Chloe without bail. The vial Richard had brandished did indeed contain a lethal dose of arsenic, and toxicology tests confirmed traces of the substance in the food and drink served to me that night. Sitting in the hotel room watching the news coverage of the case, I felt like a spectator in my own life. How did I not see what was happening under my own roof? How was I so blind? It's not your fault, Grandma, Caleb said, as if reading my mind. He had become my rock throughout this entire nightmare. I should have noticed, I replied, turning off the television. All those food poisonings, the documents Richard had me sign without reading. So many signs. You trusted him. He was your husband. 30 years, I murmured. 30 years of marriage, and he was able to cold-bloodedly plan my death. The lawyer I hired, Mr. Martinez, confirmed that Richard had squandered virtually our entire fortune on fraudulent investments. The shell company Peak Investments had disappeared with millions, and Richard had turned to loan sharks to try and recoup the lost money. The good news, Mr. Martinez explained in our meeting that afternoon, is that we've managed to trace some of the transfers. With luck, we might recover some of the money. The bad news is that your financial situation is compromised for now. I don't care about the money, I replied honestly. I just want them to pay for what they did. And they will, he assured me. The evidence is overwhelming. The recording you got is particularly damning. They'll have a hard time escaping long sentences. There was another, more delicate matter. And what will happen to Caleb? The lawyer sighed. Legally, he's a minor, and would fall under the custody of the state until he turns 18, since both his parents are indisposed. Caleb, who had insisted on being part of all the meetings, sat up straighter in his chair. I want to stay with my grandmother. We're preparing a petition for temporary guardianship, Mr. Martinez explained. Given the exceptional circumstances, I believe the judge will grant it. I looked at my grandson, feeling a mix of pride and sorrow. At 15, he had witnessed and faced more trauma than many adults. First, his father's death, now this. How are you holding up through all this? I asked him later as we had dinner in the hotel restaurant. Caleb pushed his food around for a moment before answering. Honestly, I don't know. It's like my whole life has been a lie. Not all of it, I replied softly. Your father's love for you was never a lie. and mine isn't either. I sometimes wonder, he said haltingly, if my mom was always like this. If my dad knew, the pain in his eyes was palpable. Chloe wasn't just my daughter-in-law. She was his mother, the person who was supposed to protect him above all else. I think people rarely start out evil, Caleb, I answered carefully. They make one small, bad choice, then another and another, until they find themselves doing things they never imagined they were capable of. Like conspiring to murder their mother-in-law? I agreed sadly. In the following weeks, we tried to establish a new routine. I rented a small apartment in Lincoln Park, enrolled Caleb in a new school, and we began to rebuild our lives. The case against Richard and Chloe moved forward, with pre-trial hearings revealing even more sordid details of the plot. We learned, for example, that Chloe had extensively researched undetectable poisons using public computers at libraries to avoid a trace. That Richard had consulted with 3 different doctors, including Dr. Torres, to establish a history of heart problems I never had. That they had rehearsed different versions of finding my body and how they would react. The cold-blooded calculation of it all turned my stomach. One afternoon, I received an unexpected call. It was Richard's lawyer. "Mrs. Eleanor, my client would like to speak with you. In private." "Why?" I asked, startled. "I have nothing to say to him. He claims to have information about the missing money. Information he will only share with you, personally." I consulted with Mr. Martinez, who advised caution. It could be a trap, or it could be genuine. Maybe he's trying to negotiate a lighter sentence in exchange for information. Should I go? If you decide to, do not go alone, and meet in a public place, not the jail. After much thought, I agreed to meet Richard on one condition, that it be in the presence of my lawyer at his office. Richard agreed. On the appointed day, I arrived early at Mr. Martinez's office, my stomach in knots. I hadn't seen Richard since that fateful night, and I didn't know what to expect. When he was brought into the room, handcuffed and escorted by 2 police officers, I almost didn't recognize him. Only 6 weeks in jail, and he seemed to have aged years. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken, his graying hair disheveled. "Eleanor," he said, his voice hoarse. "Thank you for coming." "I didn't come for you," I replied coldly. "I came for the money you stole." He nodded slowly. "I understand. Let's get to the point, Mr. Richard," Mr. Martinez intervened. "You mentioned having information about the diverted funds." Richard looked at me directly, ignoring the lawyer. "It wasn't all lost, Eleanor. I set a portion aside. An insurance policy, let's say." "How much?" I asked. "Close to $2 million. In an account in the Cayman Islands." Mr. Martinez leaned forward. "And you're willing to return this money in exchange for?" "A deal?" Richard replied. "A reduced sentence." "That's not up to Mrs. Eleanor," my lawyer argued. "It's the prosecutor you need to negotiate with." "But her word carries weight," Richard insisted, still looking at me. "If she says she wants a deal, that she forgives." "Forgive?" I interrupted, incredulous. "You tried to kill me, Richard. Several times. There's no forgiveness for that." He looked down. "I know. What I did was unforgivable. Then why am I here? What do you really want?" Richard hesitated. Then he said quietly, "I want to see Caleb." The audacity of the request left me momentarily speechless. "Absolutely not," I replied when I found my voice. "You lost any right to see Caleb the moment you conspired with his mother to murder me. He's my grandson," Richard insisted. "The only family I have left." "Family?" I repeated with disdain. "You don't know the meaning of the word. Caleb is the one who saved me from you, remember? He saw the monster you really are." Richard closed his eyes for a moment, as if absorbing the blow. "I'll give you the account information," he said finally. "No strings attached. It's the least I can do, Mr." Martinez slid a notepad toward him. Richard wrote down a long sequence of numbers and letters, bank details I didn't fully understand. "This will have to be verified, of course," my lawyer observed, taking the paper. Richard nodded. "I hope it helps rebuild your life, Eleanor. Yours and Caleb's." I studied his face, searching for any sign of the man I thought I knew for 30 years. "Why, Richard? Why didn't you just ask for my help? I would have given you anything to help you." He seemed genuinely surprised by the question. I don't know. Pride, maybe? Shame. And then, once I started with the lies, it just seemed easier to keep lying than to confess. Easier to try and kill me than to admit you had lost our money, I finished bitterly. "I never thought it would get to this point," he murmured. Each step seemed small at the time, justifiable, somehow. And then, suddenly, I was planning, and this. I stood up, unable to continue the conversation. "Goodbye, Richard. I hope I never see you again." He nodded slowly. "Goodbye, Eleanor. Please, tell Caleb. I'm sorry." "Tell him yourself," I replied. "At your trial. When he testifies against you." I left the room feeling strangely empty. There was no satisfaction in seeing Richard reduced to this. Only a profound sadness for the waste of so many years, so many memories now forever tainted. The trial began 6 months later. Caleb and I had settled into a new routine in our small apartment in the city. The money Richard revealed was indeed recovered. Not $2 million as he claimed, but a little over $1 million. Enough to provide us with financial security as we rearranged our lives. The courtroom was packed on the first day. Reporters, curious onlookers, and even some distant relatives who had suddenly appeared, perhaps hoping for some financial benefit from the situation. Caleb insisted on being present, despite my concerns about the emotional toll it would take on him. "I need to see this through to the end, Grandma," he explained, "so I can move on." Chloe and Richard were brought in separately, both dressed in simple clothes, without the expensive jewelry and accessories they once favored. Chloe avoided looking in our direction, but Richard's eyes searched for us immediately. When he located us, something in his face changed. A mixture of shame and resignation. The trial was brutal. The evidence against them was overwhelming. The audio recordings, the emails detailing their plans, the toxicology results from the food samples that night, the statements from doctors confirming I never had the heart problems Richard had documented, and witnesses who confirmed the fraudulent financial transactions. The most difficult moment was when Caleb was called to testify. He took the stand with his head held high, but I could see his hands were trembling slightly. "Caleb," the prosecutor began gently, "can you tell us what you heard the night before the attempted poisoning?" Caleb took a deep breath before answering. "I went downstairs to get a glass of water. I heard voices in my grandfather's study. Him and my mother. The door was cracked open, and I could hear clearly. They were discussing how they would poison my grandmother at the birthday dinner. And what did you do with that information?" At first, I was frozen. I couldn't believe it. I went back to my room and just cried. I thought maybe I had misunderstood. But the next morning, I saw my mom setting aside the special champagne, the one that would only be served to my grandmother. That's when I knew it was real. And then? I decided I had to warn my grandmother. During dinner, I managed to pass her a note, telling her to pretend to be sick and leave immediately. As Caleb spoke, I watched Chloe. Silent tears were streaming down her face, but I couldn't feel any compassion for her. What was going through her mind? Genuine remorse, or just regret for being caught? When it was the defense's turn to cross-examine Caleb, Chloe's lawyer tried a more aggressive approach. "Caleb, are you sure about what you heard? Couldn't it have been a misunderstanding? Maybe they were talking about something else." Caleb didn't waver. "I'm absolutely sure. I heard my mother ask if the poison was enough to kill quickly. I heard my grandfather say it would look like a heart attack. There's no other way to interpret that." "And your mother," the lawyer continued. "She was always a good mother to you, wasn't she? Loving, attentive." Caleb hesitated for the first time. "Yes, she was. That's why it was so hard to believe what I heard. So, it's possible that, in your emotional state after your father's death, you might have." "Objection," the prosecutor interrupted. "He's trying to browbeat the witness." "Sustained," the judge said. "Counselor, stick to the facts." When it was my turn to testify, I recounted every detail. The strange food poisonings in the months prior, Caleb's note, our discovery in the study, the final confrontation. As I spoke, I kept my eyes fixed straight ahead, unable to look at Richard or Chloe. But then, Richard's lawyer asked me a question I didn't expect. Mrs. Eleanor, during your 30 years of marriage, did you ever suspect your husband was capable of planning something like this? The question caught me off guard. No, I answered honestly. Never. And was he a good husband during those 30 years? I thought for a moment. I believed he was. So, what do you think changed? What drove a seemingly devoted man to commit such a terrible act? Objection. The prosecutor interjected. Calls for speculation. I'll rephrase, the lawyer said. Mrs. Eleanor, had your husband ever shown any violent behavior before? No. Had he ever shown any disregard for your life or well-being? No, not until recently. And you are aware of the financial difficulties he was facing? Of the pressure from loan sharks? Of the threats? I felt a lump in my throat. I am aware. Now. At the time, I knew nothing. He never shared that with me. And if he had shared it, would you have helped him? Without a doubt, I replied without hesitation. He was my husband. We would have faced it together, just as we always faced every other problem. The lawyer nodded, satisfied. He was trying to build a case of mitigating circumstances. A good man pushed to extreme acts by financial desperation. But the prosecutor didn't let that narrative stand. In her cross-examination, she clearly established the premeditation and cold-bloodedness of the plan. Mrs. Eleanor, how much time passed from the moment you received the note from your grandson to the moment you realized your drink was poisoned? Minutes, I replied. Maybe 5 at the most. And what would have happened if your grandson hadn't overheard that conversation? If he hadn't warned you? I swallowed hard. I would have drunk the champagne, and I probably would have died that night. A death planned meticulously by your husband and your daughter-in-law. A death they discussed, researched, and attempted multiple times. Yes. The 3-week trial culminated in closing arguments. The prosecutor was relentless, painting a clear picture of calculated greed and cruelty. The defense attorneys appealed to the jury's compassion, emphasizing the financial hardships and pressure Richard and Chloe were under. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours. In the case of the state versus Richard Santos, how do you find? We find the defendant guilty on all counts. In the case of the state versus Chloe Santos, how do you find? We find the defendant guilty on all counts. I felt Caleb squeeze my hand as the verdicts were read. I looked over at him and saw silent tears running down his face. For me, this was the end of a marriage, the closing of a painful chapter. For him, it was so much more the official confirmation that his mother had conspired to kill his grandmother. At the sentencing hearing 2 weeks later, Richard received 25 years in prison. Chloe, considered less culpable for not being the mastermind, received 18 years. Before they were led away, both were allowed to speak. Richard looked directly at me and Caleb. Eleanor. Caleb, I know that words are inadequate for what I've done. I don't expect forgiveness, nor do I deserve it. I just want you to know that, as impossible as it is to believe now, there was a time when my love for you was real. I am deeply sorry for destroying that. Chloe was sobbing openly. Caleb, my son, I know I failed you in the worst way possible. I have no excuses. I just want you to know that, despite everything, I always loved you. Always. Caleb didn't respond. We just sat there in silence as the guards took them away. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us, but Mr. Martinez forged a path through them, shielding us from the insistent questions. How do you feel about the verdict? Can you forgive your husband? What will you do now? In the car, Caleb finally spoke. It's really over, isn't it? Yes, I replied softly. It's over. Do you think she really loved me? My mom? The question broke my heart. How do you answer that? How do you reconcile the Chloe who loved her son with the Chloe who conspired to murder? I think she did, I finally replied. People are complicated, Caleb. They can love genuinely and still do terrible things. I don't think she stopped loving you. I think she convinced herself that what she was doing was, somehow, for your benefit. He was quiet for a long time before asking, so, what now? What do we do? It was a question I had been asking myself. We keep living, I said, one day at a time. A year passed. Life found a new rhythm. We sold the old house. Neither of us could ever live there again. We bought a small house down in Florida, near Caleb's new school. With the recovered money and the sale of the house, we were financially stable, though far from the wealth we once had. Caleb adapted surprisingly well. He made new friends, his grades improved, and he even started playing soccer, something he'd never shown interest in before. In our conversations, he rarely mentioned his parents, as if he had compartmentalized that part of his life. I found comfort in a support group for survivors of domestic violence. At first, I felt out of place. My case seemed so extreme compared to the others. But gradually, I realized we all shared the same fundamental experience: the betrayal of trust by someone who was supposed to protect us. In one of the sessions, I met Teresa, a woman my age who had survived years of abuse. We became close friends, bonded by our shared experiences. "How do you ever trust again?" I asked her one day, over coffee. After all that, she smiled gently. "You never trust in the same way, and you shouldn't, but you learn to trust differently, with your eyes open, aware of the risks, but still willing to try." Her words resonated with me. I realized I had spent so much time looking back, replaying every moment of my marriage, searching for the signs I missed, that I wasn't really living in the present. On Caleb's 16th birthday, I threw a small party. His new friends came over, as did Teresa and a few people from the support group who had become important in our lives. Watching Caleb laugh with his friends, I realized how much he had grown in the last year, not just physically, but in maturity and resilience. Later that night, after everyone had left, Caleb handed me a small package. "What's this?" I asked, surprised. "It's your birthday. I should be giving you presents." "Just open it," he insisted. Inside, there was a delicate silver picture frame. The photo showed the two of us, smiling in our new backyard, the summer sun bathing our faces. On the frame, it was engraved, "To my hero." "Caleb," I started, feeling tears well up in my eyes. "You saved our lives, Grandma," he said simply. Not just that night, but every day since. I hugged him tightly, thinking about our journey. From a family shattered by betrayal, we had built something new, smaller, simpler, but genuine. That note, "Pretend to be sick and leave immediately," had marked the end of the life we knew. But it was also the beginning of a new one. A life built on truth, not illusions, on real love, not pretense. "We saved each other," I replied finally. And, for the first time in a long time, I truly believed we were going to be okay. Now, if you liked this story, click subscribe and tell me in the comments what part left you with your jaw on the floor.